Drake is broke. He's gonna lose OVO. He's gonna lose his mansion. It's over. I mean, there was a guy on YouTube yelling that, so it has to be true, right? Listen, there are a lot of people on YouTube spreading false information. Some genuinely believe what they're saying is true, while others don't fully understand the topics they're discussing. Yet they continue promoting those ideas to thousands of people. That's something that needs to stop. That's why I'm here. I want to provide an accurate perspective and explain what's actually happening and why it's happening, so you can walk away with a clear and informed understanding. Pushing propaganda or chasing headlines purely for clicks and views is not something I will ever do here on Hip Hop Flash. We've all seen the reports about Drake's OVO company being sued, and we've also seen discussions about Drake potentially selling 50% of OVO. Many people are trying to connect those two stories and conclude that Drake is broke. In reality, this appears to be a business move, and I'll explain why that may be happening. No one can speak with absolute certainty because none of us are in the room where these decisions are being made. However, we can examine the available information, look at similar situations involving branding companies owned by hip-hop artists and athletes, review the evidence, and then form our own conclusions. Before we get into everything, make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to Hip Hop Flash if you haven't already. If you're watching on mobile, hitting the like button really helps this video reach more people through the algorithm. With that said, let's get into it. First, let's establish something important. Everything we're discussing in this video relates specifically to OVO clothing and apparel. We're not talking about OVO sound, and we're not talking about Drake's music career. This discussion is focused entirely on the clothing and apparel side of the business. OVO Apparel was founded by Drake, 40, and Oliver. If you remember the famous Drake lyric about giving Oliver the owl branding, that's exactly what happened. For some background, Oliver and Drake came up in the same circles very early in Drake's career. Oliver worked as a DJ and also had experience working in high-end fashion stores, particularly those specializing in streetwear. When it came to branding, image development, and shaping the overall identity of the OVO brand, there really wasn't a better person within Drake's circle to partner with than 40 and Oliver. Because Oliver had a strong retail background and a deep understanding of streetwear culture in both Toronto and New York City, Oliver was the ideal person to help build and manage OVO's flagship stores. Not only did he help establish the brand identity, but he also helped transform OVO into an international business. Let's look at some numbers. OVO reportedly generates over $50 million annually, with approximately $7.7 million coming from online revenue alone. As I mentioned earlier, the company operates on an international scale. It has 7 flagship stores located in Toronto, New York City, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and London. In addition, OVO has established multiple licensing partnerships through brand collaborations. They built this company from the ground up and turned it into a globally recognized apparel brand. Now, I know why many of you are here. You want to know why Drake is considering selling 50% of the company, what's happening with the loan situation, and whether Drake actually owes money. Let's break it down. Drake is reportedly considering selling 50% of OVO to ABG, which I'll explain shortly. But the first thing you need to understand is this. If you're looking at this situation solely from the perspective of Drake as an individual, you're missing the bigger picture. We're discussing a multi-million-dollar business. Once you start viewing this through a business lens instead of a personal one, everything changes. It's not about what one individual owns or doesn't own. It's about company assets, cash flow, annual revenue, operational expenses, supply chains, and profitability. Those are the factors that matter when evaluating business decisions. Now let's talk about OVO's financial position. Earlier, I showed you the licensing partnerships and collaborations they've completed over the past year. We're talking about major global brands such as Disney, PlayStation, Jordan, and Bape. These are some of the most recognizable and established brands in the world. Working with brands of that magnitude means producing a large volume of apparel, and that's where one of the challenges emerges. Retail overhead can significantly impact profitability. Producing clothing is expensive. Sometimes products don't sell as quickly as expected. Inventory sits on shelves, discounts become necessary, employee costs continue, and operating multiple flagship stores adds even more expenses. As a result, companies often make structural changes. One possible solution is partnering with an experienced company by selling a percentage of ownership. A strategic partner can help improve operational efficiency, increase margins, and ultimately generate greater profits. Anyone who's owned or operated a business, particularly in clothing or food service, understands how thin profit margins can be. Even small improvements in efficiency can have a major impact on overall profitability. Now let's talk about the loan, because that's the aspect of the story that has captured everyone's attention. OVO reportedly secured a $5.2 million loan from ARI. The purpose of that loan was to support continued business growth and provide operational capital. Consider all of the collaborations mentioned earlier: NFL, Disney, BAPE, WWE, and others. Producing merchandise for these partnerships requires substantial upfront investment. Manufacturing costs rise significantly when you're creating large quantities of apparel on a tight timeline. This type of financing is a leverage strategy, not necessarily an indication that the company is on the verge of bankruptcy. If you've ever been involved in business, real estate, or investing, you've probably heard the phrase OPM, other people's money. Do you really think Drake personally writes checks from his own bank account every time OVO needs funding for production and operations? That's not how businesses of this scale operate. Companies frequently use outside capital to generate additional revenue and accelerate growth. According to reports, there was a missed payment associated with the loan. ARI had the legal right to enforce repayment, but instead, both parties reportedly reached an agreement that placed the loan into forbearance. Forbearance essentially means that loan payments can be temporarily suspended under agreed-upon terms. During that period, OVO appears to have been pursuing a larger strategic objective, finding a partner or investor willing to acquire approximately 50% of the company and help improve infrastructure, operational efficiency, and long-term profitability. It's actually a fairly straightforward business strategy. Many people with student loans have experienced forbearance at some point, where payments are temporarily suspended through an agreement with the lender. I can already hear some people saying, "You're defending Drake because you're a fan." No, I'm simply explaining the situation based on the available information. Now, some might ask, if both parties agreed to forbearance, why would there still be legal action? That's where the dispute appears to exist. OVO's position seems to be that they fulfilled their obligations and made the necessary payments. Meanwhile, the lender's position appears to focus on interest and additional financial considerations tied to the original agreement. And that's where the disagreement begins. The lender's position is essentially this: you borrowed a certain amount of money, and that agreement included interest. That's why we provided the loan in the first place. Meanwhile, OVO's position is, we repaid the loan early, so we shouldn't have to pay the full amount of interest. Situations like this happen all the time in business. The paperwork gets filed, both parties go to court if necessary, negotiations take place, and eventually a settlement is reached. One side wants to pay as little as possible, while the other side wants to recover as much as possible. It's a standard business dispute. I know the headlines are saying things like, Drake missed the loan payment, he's going broke, he needs money, he's going to sell his catalog, he's losing his mansion, OVO put up its logo as collateral and now they're going to lose it. Please just stop and think for a second. Keep listening, because there's a much more logical explanation. Why would OVO want to sell 50% of the company, and why now? First, you generally want to sell at a peak. Iceman has just dropped, and OVO has completed numerous major brand collaborations that we've already discussed. If you're going to bring in a strategic partner, you do it when the company's value is high, not when it's declining. This decision appears to be about infrastructure rather than immediate cash. The company OVO is considering partnering with, ABG, has more than 1,700 licensing partners across 150 countries. Think about what that means. It opens the door to countless new opportunities and collaborations for OVO.
What have I been telling you throughout this video? Their strategy over the past few years has been centered around expanding through partnerships and collaborations. OVO is largely self-managed. They have their own team and leadership, but there comes a point where additional expertise can make a significant difference, especially when it comes to retail operations and apparel manufacturing. This reminds me of the famous conversation between Kanye West and Sway. In that discussion, Kanye talked about how difficult it is for musicians to break into the highest levels of fashion. He explained that no matter how much fame, influence, or money you have, there comes a point where you need access to larger networks, established infrastructure, and industry connections. That's why Kanye partnered with companies like Gap, Balenciaga, Nike, and Adidas throughout different stages of his career. Once a brand reaches a certain size, scaling further becomes extremely difficult without strategic partnerships. The connections, manufacturing capabilities, distribution systems, and retail expertise become just as important as the brand itself. That's one reason many entrepreneurs choose to sell a portion of their company. The other interesting point from that Kanye and Sway conversation was Sway's argument that you should build things yourself. Ironically, Kanye later acknowledged that Sway actually had a point. You build things yourself for as long as possible, but eventually you either need additional support or a strategic exit to continue growing. That's exactly where OVO appears to be today. So who is ABG? ABG, or Authentic Branding Group, is a massive organization in the branding and licensing world. They already manage more than 50 brands within their portfolio. In other words, OVO wouldn't be partnering with amateurs. They would be partnering with specialists whose entire business revolves around growing brands. ABG has over 1,700 licensing partners operating in 150 countries and generates approximately $36 billion in annual retail sales. And who do they work with? Brands you've definitely heard of: Reebok, Champion, Sports Illustrated, Forever 21. They also manage licensing rights associated with legendary figures such as Elvis Presley, Shaquille O'Neal, and Muhammad Ali. This is billion-dollar business at the highest level. What OVO sees is an opportunity to reach another tier of growth by working alongside experts in apparel, licensing, branding, and retail operations. And if we're trying to predict what happens next, it's useful to examine history. We've seen examples where this strategy didn't work. Take Rocawear. After being fully sold, many people felt the company lost its creative energy and gradually became overly corporate. You can also look at Sean John. After being sold to Global Brands Group, the company eventually struggled, filed for bankruptcy, and lost much of the cultural influence that originally made it successful. But we've also seen examples where strategic partnerships worked extremely well. Look at LeBron James in Spring Hill. LeBron didn't need money when he entered that deal. The company was valued at around $725 million. The reason for the partnership wasn't financial desperation, it was strategic growth. He partnered with people who could help elevate the business to a higher level. That's often the value of working with experienced operators and established organizations. So why is Drake considering selling part of OVO? It's not because he's broke. It's not because OVO is failing. It's because they're considering partnering with a company that can provide additional infrastructure, expertise, resources, and global reach. OVO is already generating more than $50 million annually. The challenge isn't necessarily revenue. The challenge is improving profit margins and operational efficiency. By partnering with a company like ABG while retaining 50% ownership, OVO could potentially increase cash flow, improve profitability, and continue expanding without sacrificing its identity. Keeping half of the company allows Drake, Oliver, and the OVO team to maintain creative control and preserve the culture that helped build the brand in the first place. It's a very different situation from completely selling the company and handing over full control to a large corporation. And that's really the story. If you came here expecting a dramatic narrative about Drake being bankrupt and total collapse, the facts simply don't support that conclusion. I'm glad I could provide some context and hopefully clear up some of the confusion. Honestly, I feel bad for people who are being misled by sensational headlines and misinformation online. Every day I see comments saying, "See, Drake is broke." Stop listening to people who don't do proper research. A lot of creators rely heavily on AI without understanding how to properly verify information. AI can be a useful tool, but it's only as effective as the person using it. I use AI myself. It helps with graphics, organization, and reviewing portions of my work. It's an excellent tool when used correctly. But if you're going to use AI, at least use it responsibly. And if you're going to criticize someone, at least criticize them based on facts. For example, someone could argue that OVO should improve its profit margins, or point out that the company reportedly took losses during a particular period. That's a reasonable business critique. The decision to seek additional capital and explore a partial sale is directly connected to solving those challenges. But creating outrageous narratives simply to generate clicks and views is something else entirely. Have some integrity. My name is Hip Hop Flash, and on this channel, we don't just talk about music, we talk about the business of music. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and show some support if you're watching on mobile. And welcome to all the new subscribers. We've seen incredible growth recently, and I want to get to know all of you better. Leave a comment and let me know where you're from, who your favorite artist is, and which creators you enjoy watching. Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'm always reading what you have to say, and I'm always open to a good debate. Peace.